Great. Luke 15, starting at verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not repent. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents.
Great. So we're thinking about what is it that gives us value? What is it that gives each and every one of us value? And I'm just guessing, but I think probably everyone in this building tonight shares a similar belief. And that similar belief is this, that every single member of the human race has value. And that value is not linked to how much money they have in the bank. It's not linked to their social status. It's not linked to their class. It's not linked to their race. It's not linked to their gender. It's not linked to their ability in any way, shape, or form. Every single member of the human family has value. Do we kind of believe that? It's the sort of thing that if you don't believe that, you get kicked off Facebook pretty quickly, okay? You're not part of polite society if you don't think that every single person has value and that everybody has equal value, right? Do we believe that? Do we believe in equality? Do we believe that we all have an equal value? Now, if you do believe that, and I kind of assume that everybody does believe that here. If you don't, you can have a word with me later and you can say, no, I think there are some people who are much better than other people, and there are some classes of people that are better than other people. There's one gender that's better than the other gender. You might want to come to me and say that kind of thing. I bet you do it quietly, though. I bet you don't want to be overheard saying that. Because we all tend to think that everybody has an equal human value and dignity. Elon Musk is the richest man on planet Earth. They say he's going to be the first person in the world who will exceed $300 billion in net worth. $300 billion. Currently, he is worth about 210 billion pounds. 210 billion. Now, is he more valuable as a human being than other people? Is he more valuable than you? Is he more valuable than the homeless guy down the street? Now, there's something in all of us that wants to say, no, everybody is the same. Everybody has the same value. And tonight, I just want to question, where does that belief come from? Because we all seem to share it, but actually, there are all sorts of things in this world that might make you think differently. That might make you think, well, Elon Musk, he's worth a lot more than you and me. Maybe he's a better human being. Maybe he's more valuable. This all came to a head on a TV program about 2 years ago as people were starting to lock down. On the TV program called Big Questions, Nikki Campbell hosts this program on a Sunday morning, and they were talking about the ethics of lockdown. Why did we lock down in response to coronavirus? And there was a Supreme Court justice called Lord Sumption who was on the program. We're going to watch a clip of him in just a second. And he was making the argument that lockdown punishes the young and privileges the elderly. That's what he said. That was his claim. And his claim was that because coronavirus actually does not affect the young as much as it affects the elderly, perhaps we shouldn't have locked down. And then he made this claim. Let's have a look at what he says.
First of all, I don't accept that all lives are of equal value. My children's and my grandchildren's life is worth much more than mine because they've got a lot more of it ahead. The whole concept of quality life years ahead is absolutely fundamental if one's going to look at the value of these things.
So, not all lives are of equal value, he said. Shock horror. He said something that goes against our great consensus that all lives are of equal value. Does he really mean that? Well, all of a sudden, there's a cubic ton of cortisol that's kind of injected into the TV studio, and they bring on a woman who is immunocompromised because of the chemotherapy that she is on. And she is outraged by what Lord Sumption says. Really? All lives are not equally valuable? How very dare you? Here's what she said.
Deborah, I'm sure you might want to comment here on what Lord Sumption has said and what Catherine has commented on. This the valuation of life.
Yeah, with all due respect, Lord Sumption, I'm the person who you say their life is not valuable. I live with metastatic bowel cancer.
I didn't say it wasn't valuable. I said
being very selfish, I don't.
Hang on. He's just. If I can stop you there, Deborah. Sure. I know the technology is difficult, but I just want to clarify because Lord Sumption came in there when you were speaking, and he said, "I didn't say it wasn't valuable. I said it was less valuable." So you can pick up and run with that one. Carry on.
My response to that would be, who are you to question and put a value on life? In my view, and I think in many others, life is sacred, and I don't think we should make those judgment calls. I feel very, very strongly about that. And I totally agree with Catherine in terms of all life is worth saving, regardless of what life it is that people are living.
What a very powerful thing to say. All life is equally valuable, no matter which kind of life it is. Where do we land on that question? Is all life equally valuable? And what I want to say is this evening, all of us have a gut instinct that everybody's life is equally valuable, no matter what. Where do we get this idea from? Where do we get the idea that not only is life valuable, not only are we valuable, but every single human being has an equal value? And Deborah James just said, we believe that life is sacred. Do you believe that? See, that's a strange belief to hold if you think that we are just biological survival machines. If I'm just a biological survival machine clinging to an insignificant rock, hurtling through a meaningless universe towards eternal extinction, life is not sacred, is it? I think we often live with two competing kind of stories in our head. We have a story about our existence, and we have a story about our ethics. And so often the story we tell about our existence is very different to the story we tell about our ethics and what is valuable. The story we tell about God, whether there is a God or not a God, and the story we tell about the good and what is the good life, sometimes those stories are totally different. So a lot of people think we live in an utterly indifferent universe. There is no God. There's nothing and no one that fundamentally cares about you, and you might value your family, but in 100 years' time, no one will even remember the names of your family members. You might think your health is really important. In 100 years, your health will be terrible. I tell you that much. And we live in a godless world in which ultimately there are not any values, really, but we think life is sacred. So many people, they believe in terms of existence. You know what? We think the survival of the fittest is the deepest truth about why human life exists on this planet. The survival of the fittest is the deepest answer to the question, why are we here? They believe that, and they believe Vladimir Putin is wrong. Well, most people believe Vladimir Putin is wrong. Probably most people in this room think Vladimir Putin is wrong. But if survival of the fittest is the deepest truth about how we've got here, how is Vladimir Putin wrong? Well, he's not, is he? Well, the strong rule over the weak. That's what they do all the time. And yet we live with this split. We live with these values in which life is sacred, in which all human beings are of equal value, in which you should protect the marginalized and the weak, in which you should use your power to serve people and not to dominate them. We have all these beliefs over here that make no sense when you consult people's views about God over here. If there is no God, if there is not a realm of ultimate value that lasts forever, then why do we think that life is sacred? Why do we think that humans are intrinsically valuable? Why do we think that a society should be judged by the way it treats its weakest members? I think we often live with an immense split between our beliefs about existence and the ethics that we want to live. So many of us think we are essentially just clever apes and we really should love each other. Why? Why? And tonight what I want to do is I want to bring these two stories into conversation with one another. And what I want to do is I want to affirm what you believe about value, about the sanctity of life, about compassion being the highest virtue, about protecting the marginalized and the weak. I want to affirm when you think Vladimir Putin is wrong. I want to affirm when you think we should take in Ukrainian refugees. I want to affirm that you think that we should protect and provide for the marginalized and the weak. And I want to tell you, we should do that because of what God is like, because of the kind of universe that we live in. It's not that we live in a godless kind of a world, but we should be good. I think that's absurd. And what I want to do, as I tell you about Jesus, I don't want to add to your absurdity. As I tell you about faith, I'm not adding to the absurdity of your world. I'm explaining to you what would otherwise be absurd. Why value humans if there is not a God who values humans? Why privilege the weak and the marginalized and the refugee when the God of the universe doesn't do that? I've got good news for you. The good news for you tonight is that you don't need to live split. You don't need to have a split between what you think the good life is and what God is like. I want to bring those things together, and I want to say to you, there is a God who values humans more than you could possibly know, who values you more than you could possibly know, and he gives sense to the values you have. He makes sense of the life that you think is the right kind of a life, the life of self-giving, the life of sacrifice, the life of love. You think that's the right kind of life. And I want to tell you why that is the right kind of life. Here we've got two famous philosophers, perhaps the two most famous philosophers in the history of the world. On the left, we've got Plato. He was always pointing up to the things that are higher than us. And then on his left, he's got Aristotle pointing down. Aristotle was more grounded about the things of this world. But what they were united about, Plato and Aristotle, philosophers going back to 2,500 years, what they were utterly convinced of, and what every ancient thinker was utterly convinced of, was that equality is nonsense. Equal human value is totally absurd. So, for instance, Plato, on the left, says nature herself intimates that it is just for the better to have more than the worse, the more powerful than the weaker. Justice consists in the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. Isn't that the opposite of what you believe? If someone has less and someone has more, we think that's unjust. Plato looks at that and he says, too right. That's how it should be. Nature has taught you that. You should enforce what nature is doing. If there's inequality, you should enforce the inequality. Nature has made the poor person poor, so keep them poor. You don't want to go against nature, do you? says Plato. Inequality is totally natural, and it's right. Aristotle, Plato's student, he said, for that some should rule and others be ruled is a thing not only necessary, but expedient. It's not only the way things have to be, it's good that there are some who rule and some who are ruled over. From the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, others for rule. You know another word for subjection? Slavery. Both Plato and Aristotle were absolutely, they taught slavery. So sometimes people say, oh, Plato and Aristotle, they defended slavery. They didn't defend slavery. No one was attacking slavery. Slavery was assumed. And Plato and Aristotle taught that nature intends for there to be some people who are slave masters and some people who are slaves. And they said, think about it. Some people, they just can't get their act together. They can't rule over their own lives. And some people, they're really organized. Wouldn't it be great if you got the organized people to tell the disorganized people what to do? That's what nature teaches you. And you know that every single human civilization there's ever been that's got to any kind of size has had slavery. You know that, don't you? It is a human universal. Our belief in equality, it's nuts historically. It's absurd. Equality is not something that is naturally taught. It's not universal. It's not obvious to the great thinkers of this world. So where do we get it from? Where do we get this idea that humans are valuable, that you can't just use them as living tools? That's what Plato and Aristotle called slaves. They're just living tools. You know, a shovel is a tool. It's good for digging. So is a slave. You've got to feed the slave, though. But that's the only difference. They thought that was obvious. They thought that was natural. They thought it was universal, and it was universal. What happened to make us start valuing people and to value all people equally? What happened? Well, we've got to think about how we value anything, really. There was an interesting conversation a few years ago between Sam Harris, an atheist and neuroscientist, and Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist and a YouTuber. And Sam Harris was talking about how we value things. How do we come to value anything? And he started talking about a glass of water. It's a really interesting analogy. Let's have a look.
And so if I tell you, well, this glass, this isn't just an ordinary glass. I know it looks just like that one, but this is the glass that Elton John drank from in his last concert here,
yeah, right.
So, you know, what do you want to pay me for it, right?
Right.
It could be that, you know, you're just the biggest Elton John fan ever, and it's worth quite a lot to you. Now it's a kind of evident, it's not value intrinsic to the glass, but
Right.
it is a,
Where's the value located?
well, it's a measure in the change this provokes in your experience.
So you've got a glass. What is it worth? Think of just any glass. What is it worth? It's probably worth about £1, isn't it? £1. And how do you value that glass? Well, in one sense, you value something depending on what someone's prepared to pay for it. And if it's just an ordinary glass, then you're probably prepared to pay maybe £1. But then some glasses are paper cups and some glasses are crystal. Some water is Perrier and some water is ditch water. And so some glasses are more valuable than others, aren't they? And you just have to look at the material contents of the glass and you can figure out that's a more valuable glass than that one. And at this stage, Plato and Aristotle come along and they say, yeah, that's the same with people too. You take any two people and you say, this person is stronger than that person. And this person is smarter than that person. And this person is more economically valuable than that person. This person is richer than that person. This person is from a higher status than that person. And in all these ways, this person is better than that person. This person is more valuable than that person. Okay? That is what Plato says. That's what Aristotle says. That's what anyone says if you just look at people according to their material contents, right? If you just looked at me according to my material contents, what am I worth? Apparently, they tell me that you could boil down my body and you could extract the minerals and I would be worth around about the same as a Big Mac meal. Okay? Is that my value? Now, you could harvest some of my organs, I guess, At that stage, I'm worth a few thousand probably on the black market, maybe up to 10,000 on the black market. That's quite valuable. Maybe you could enslave me and you could shackle me to an exercise bike and I power a generator. And over the course of my life, how many kilowatt hours will I produce? Is that my worth? My economic productivity? What am I worth? Am I worth my material contents? Am I worth my economic productivity? Am I worth what's in the bank? All of you are saying, no, your worth is completely separate from that thing. Why? Why do you think that? If I am a biological survival machine clinging to an insignificant rock, hurtling through a meaningless universe towards eternal extinction, I'm worth the same as a Big Mac meal. Really. And you know it. And you're the same. So Sam Harris is asking us to think, how do we value things? Have a look at a glass of water and you value it according to its material properties. And he says that's a good thing. He says it's a bad thing because, like, if you invent this story about Elton John, you notice he said, what if I told you this is Elton John's glass? All of a sudden, if you think this is Elton John's glass and you are a big Elton John fan, then suddenly there's something from outside the system that's really valuable. Elton John has been connected to this glass somehow, and I'm connected to Elton John because I'm a massive fan. And so now I might pay you, I don't know, I might pay you 1,000 pounds for that glass, right? It's 1,000 times more valuable because of the existence of Elton John. Now, Sam Harris uses this analogy to look at, actually, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He actually asks us to imagine that the glass represents that strip of land at the end of the Mediterranean. And he says it's a real shame that we've got these God stories. God is like a great Elton John. And because we've got this God story, it's inflating the value of the land. And now people are fighting over the land. And they're giving it far too much value because they're believing in this nonsense fairy tale of this Elton John in the sky giving value. And it's making us overinflate the value of the land. Here's how he completes the analogy.
Sure. So this is the reason why Israel and the Israelis and the Palestinians can't negotiate as though their problems could be solved by a real estate transaction is because they have irrational and irreconcilable claims upon land and buildings.
Do you think they're any more irrational than the claim that that glass is worth something?
Well, no, it's like that.
It's like that, okay? So there's this God story about the land, and there's the Israelis and the Palestinians. They're fighting over the land as though it's worth thousands of pounds, right? Because they believe in an Elton John figure. They believe that God exists, this fairy tale figure. And so they're valuing this land far too much. And because of the hyper-inflated value, they're fighting over it in a way that they shouldn't. It's just land, people. Get over it. It's just land. That's what Sam Harris is trying to say at this point. And he completes the illustration like this.
The true analogy here, the complete analogy is rather like we're about to fight over Elton John's glass, and Elton John was never here. Right?
And he gets a massive round of applause because everybody in the room knows that lives are more valuable than land. How can we be valuing land and hyper-inflating the value of the land and fighting over the land? We know that lives are more important than land. Okay. But if we think lives are more important than land, why? Why do we think that lives are more important than land? You see, everyone claps when they think that the land is the glass. What if the human person is like the glass, right? And then with the human person, some people are more like cardboard cups and other people are like crystal glass, right? Some people are really economically productive and some people aren't. Some people are really strong and some people aren't. Some people are smart and some people aren't. And when we're talking about the human person, if there is no Elton John outside the system, then actually lives could be as worthless as land, couldn't they? What is it that's going to give each person dignity, worth, Value. Paging a cosmic Elton John. Humanity needs you. And the Bible says there is such a person. There is someone outside the system who has so valued us that we are worth something that's far different from our economic productivity. You are worth far more than anything that you could produce. You are worth far more than what we can sell your organs for. You are worth far more than what is in your bank account. You are worth far more than what other people say you are worth. You are infinitely valued by an infinite source of value, which gives you infinite value, infinite worth. It gives you the sanctity of life that you probably already believe in, but you don't have any right to believe in that sanctity of life without the cosmic Elton John, without somebody from outside the system who values you. You know, on page 1 of the Bible, God makes humanity in his own image. Male and female, he creates them. And he makes them in his image. It's a stunning truth on page 1 of the Bible. Apparently, we are not just biological survival machines. Apparently, we don't just live in an indifferent universe. We live in a world that was loved into being, and we are specially loved, put at the intersection of heaven and earth, uniquely blessed by heaven, to have a unique dominion, rule over earth. It's a stunning portrait. And God makes humanity in his image. It's a stunning truth. All the other ancient Near Eastern myths of the day, they might talk about chaotic battles in the heavens, and earth is made as this afterthought, and humans are made to slave so that they can do the work of the gods. So different. In the Bible, humanity are made precious in God's sight, not to be slaves, but to rule. And God makes us in his image. In some of the other ancient Near Eastern myths, maybe the king is said to be in the image of a god, because for these squabbling deities in the other religions, a tyrant is a pretty good image of that kind of God. But actually in the Bible, all humanity, male and female, are in the image of God. And then somebody comes along who is said to be the supreme image of God. His name is Jesus Christ, and we've got one of his biographies here. Luke is a biographer of Jesus, tells the story of Jesus, the same as Matthew and Mark and John do. These are the 4 biographies that begin the New Testament. Jesus is said to be the very image of God. I don't know what you picture when you picture God, but the Bible says, picture Jesus. First and foremost, picture this Jesus. And I don't know if you've picked up a gospel and read it since becoming an adult, but if you haven't, take this as our gift to you. I don't know if you've read the Bible in the, let's just say, if you haven't read the Bible in the last couple of years, why don't you just take this as an opportunity? You can slip it inside a pocket, slip it inside your purse, take it wherever you want, and get to know this Jesus, because he gives you a unique picture of what God is like and a unique picture of what humans are like. In the bit that Pete just read out for us, it's on page 42. Let's have a look at it now. On page 42, we're going to see, looking at Jesus, what is God like and what are we like? And in the intersection of those two things, you will find your value. What is God like and what are we like? Page 42. And the heading says, the parable of the lost sheep. Big number 15 means it's chapter 15 of Luke's gospel. And it begins like this. Now, the tax collectors and sinners, these are the baddies, okay? These are the ones who say, I don't care what God wants me to do. I'm not bothered, right? They're wearing that T-shirt. They're all gathering around to hear Jesus. They love Jesus. Jesus is the friend of sinners. All those who know that they haven't lived up to God's standard, as long as they own that, they feel so welcome in the presence of Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, They are the religious authorities, okay? They don't like the grace, the mercy, the kindness, the forgiveness of Jesus. They're muttering. They're saying, this man, Jesus, he welcomes sinners and eats with them. Outrageous. They don't like that. We'll think more about these guys on Wednesday. Then Jesus told them this parable. He said, suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. First question, what are we like? According to this parable, this story, this spiritual story, what are we like? Well, we're like sheep, okay? What are sheep like? Sheep are morons, aren't they? Right? Think of all the animals that Jesus could liken humanity to, okay? He could liken us to roaring lions, right? Or soaring eagles, or even faithful dogs. That would be okay, wouldn't it? But what does he say humans are like? We're like sheep. And what are sheep like? Sheep are so dumb, so dumb. We've got a shepherd, a farmer in our congregation, in my church in Eastbourne. And I once said, sheep are moronic. And he came up to me and he said, you have no idea how stupid sheep are. And then he starts telling me all these stories about how idiotic his sheep have been. He's like, do you know that if it rains too much and they get too heavy with their wool, they fall over and they die because they can't get back up again. And if they ever fall down a ravine and they get lost, finding them does not help. Like you cannot get down to the ravine, put them back on their feet, and they go, come on, Flossie, back home. Flossie just bleats at you like a moron because Flossie is a moron. You need to hoist Flossie onto the Jeep that you're on or onto your shoulders as this shepherd does. Sheep are lost and they're forever going astray. And they're forever following after other morons. And what are you like? Spiritually speaking, I'm a moron. And I'm always following after other morons, right? When they take the sheep for slaughter, there's usually one Judas sheep. Haven't got time to go into why they call him a Judas sheep, but even that's got an interesting Christian history. But what the Judas sheep is they train the Judas sheep to walk a certain path towards their destiny, towards their fate. And the other sheep, what do? They follow the Judas sheep. Then there's an escape hatch for the Judas sheep. And the Judas sheep escapes. All the others follow to their doom. Because that's what sheep are like. They'll just, whoever's in the love, they'll just follow. And isn't that you and me? The latest trend, the latest fad, latest holiday, latest experience, latest performance, latest achievement. What is it that we're always following after? And we're just so culturally conditioned to be like the Joneses, to keep up with the Smiths. We're always following after these things, and none of them give us life. Jesus says that's what human beings are like. There's an Old Testament verse. It says, we're all like sheep who go astray. Each of us turn to our own way. That's what we're like. There's a good shepherd who wants to give you life and pasture. We're like people who say, no thanks, I'm good. And we try to make life work out of resources that are not fit for purpose. It's really great when people say family gives their life meaning. There are many families that destroy our hearts. There really are. And even if your family is the best family in the world, goodness me, the lips of everyone you've ever kissed will one day be dust. And so will you. We can't feed off these things forever. These are not a source of life that's going to sustain us. But we're always trying to make life work out of little things that don't survive, can't survive, won't survive. What are we like? We're like sheep going astray. What is Jesus like? Well, Jesus is the image of God. He is what God is like. And what does he do? He comes to find the lost. And he doesn't hoist the lost onto his shoulders because they've bleated in a particularly pleasing manner. It's not because he's just a sucker for a sheep in distress. There's nothing about the sheep that makes him go and rescue the sheep. It's because of what he's like. That's true of Jesus. Jesus doesn't love you because of what you're like. But he does love you because of what he's like. And what's he like? He's the kind of God who would come into your world and share your plight and share your fate. He's the kind of God who comes to our side because that's what love does, right? If you love someone and they're in trouble, what do? Well, you say, your trouble will be my trouble. If they're in debt, you might love them enough to say, your debts will become my debts. That's love, isn't it? If they're in pain, you might want to side with them in their pain. If they're being oppressed by others, you might want to stand up for them shoulder to shoulder and face down their oppressor. That would be a good friend, wouldn't it? What does Jesus do? Jesus comes to planet Earth, and here we are just going our own way, getting lost, perishing. And Jesus says, your perishing will be my perishing. Down he comes into our plight. On the cross, he dies our death, perishing in the darkness, alone. And then he rises up again, and he says, well, let my green pastures be pastures. Let me take you home. What are we like? What is he like? His story goes on. There's the parable of the lost coin. He says, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me. I have found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. You know, when I was researching about Elon Musk, I found out that he is worth 210 billion pounds. He earns the equivalent of 375 pounds a second, which, when you think about it, if he lost a coin on the floor, it doesn't matter how valuable that coin was. It would not be worth his while bending down to pick it up, would it? Like, how many seconds does it take to bend down and pick? Like, if it took 3 seconds, it would have to be 1,000 pounds on the floor before it's even worth his while to bend down and pick it up. I don't know what you bend down to pick up. What kind of denomination of coin is it worth it? You know, if you see just a penny, do you stop traffic and go down just for the penny? A lot of people would, but they don't usually admit it in a room this size because they. But I don't know, 20p, for me, I'll admit to 20p. If I see 20p, one penny, I might leave it. 20p, silver, glistening, shiny, I like it. I'm going to stop, I'm going to bend. I did some maths earlier today to figure out 20p in my money is worth about 320,000 pounds in Elon Musk's money, right? 20p as a proportion of what I'm worth is 20p. As a proportion of what Elon Musk is worth, it would be about 320,000 pounds, okay? Is he going to sweep the house and have a look for the coin? No, he is not, right? But here we've got a woman who absolutely upends everything for the sake of this one coin. What is the value of that one coin? Well, it's interesting. What is the value of a coin? If you get a coin out, melting it down will yield you some kind of value, won't it? You can melt down the material contents of a 20p piece. It's not worth 20p in terms of its material properties, is it? Why, when you give it to the newsagents, does he or she count it as worth 20p? Oh, well, there's a stamp on that coin, isn't there? There's an image. There's the Queen's head, right? And we've all agreed that this is a token that is worth 20p. It's fascinating. Later on, keep a finger in Luke 15 and turn on just a few pages, 10 pages to page 52. And there's a fascinating story about a coin. You might know it. It's become famous. It's actually page 53, sorry, page 53, Luke chapter 20. People come to test Jesus, and they put him on the horns of a dilemma. Whichever way he answers this question, he's going to be in trouble, okay? In verse 22, that's little number 22, about a third of the way down, the end of that paragraph, these people ask Jesus, is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus is damned if he does, damned if he doesn't in this situation. If he says we should pay taxes, the Romans are happy, the Jews are very unhappy. If he says we shouldn't pay taxes, the Jews are very happy, the Romans put him on a cross. Okay? He's in a bind. Don't you just love Jesus though? He's so clever. Look at this. Verse 23, he saw through their duplicity and said to them, show me a denarius. Okay, a denarius is about a day's wage. It's a coin. Then he says, whose image and inscription are on it? Caesar's, they replied. They didn't have the queen, they had Caesar, right? He said to them, then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Boom. Don't you love Jesus, okay? He's like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Pay your taxes to the Romans. But then he turns on the Jewish authorities and he says, give to God's what is God's image. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's image, a coin, but give to God what is God's image. What is God's image? We are. Give God yourself, because God has put his very image on you. Yeah, sure. Caesar can have the money. Give God what is God's. What is God's? Well, it's whatever has his image on it. Our currency belongs to the Queen, right? We belong to the God who put his image on us. Here is the cosmic Elton John, right? Here is the one who has so valued us from outside the system. And he says we are incredibly valuable, far more valuable than our material contents, far more valuable than our economic productivity. We are in the very image of God, and we belong to God. And we're even more valuable than that. Because think of it this way. What is something's value? Something's value is what somebody is prepared to pay for it. So what's your value? Your value is what someone was prepared to pay for it. Jesus, the image of God, comes to planet Earth, to his beloved creatures who have his stamp on them, have his image, and he pays for them. He pays for us. And it's not just like Elon Musk shelling out a few thousand here or there. Jesus gives his very self to us. He pays with his own heart's blood. What are you worth? You're worth the very blood of God. So says Acts chapter 20 in the New Testament. You're worth the very blood of God. How much is that? It's precious beyond imagining, precious beyond all reckoning. What are you worth? Silly sheep though you are, straying sheep though you are, you've been valued at the price of the Son of God. And everyone's been valued at the price of the Son of God. Elon Musk and the homeless guy down the road, all of us equally valued, all of us equally sought after, all of us equally loved. But will we be found? Will we allow ourselves to be found by the Good Shepherd? He's come all this way to hoist us onto his shoulders and to march us home. What do you make of this Jesus? He makes sense of you. He makes sense of God. He makes sense of all your values. He gets you. Do you get him? Well, in a second, Andy's going to come up and he's going to ask you what your response is to a night like tonight. You might see these response cards. One of them says, I'm a Christian and I was encouraged tonight. You don't have to tick that box, but it's available to you. The second box says, I'm a Christian who's not been to church for a while, but I decided tonight to renew my commitment to Jesus. Oh my goodness, Jesus has committed himself to you. Give Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is. Decided to renew my commitment to Jesus. Number 3, for the first time, I decided tonight to trust Jesus. What else are you going to trust, right? What do you think? Do we really live in a meaningless universe heading towards eternal extinction? Or are you loved to death? Which is it? Is Jesus someone you can trust? Is he someone you can trust more than you trust yourself? If so, maybe number 3 is for you. For the first time, I decided tonight to trust Jesus. Number 4, I'm interested in finding out more about Jesus. We've got lots of ways for you to find out more about Jesus. We'd love to get in touch with you and lead you in that. Number 5, I've no wish to take things further currently. We won't bother you. You can tick that box. That's absolutely fine. What do you think about which one of those boxes might really suit you? And can I really urge you, if you haven't picked up a part of the Bible in the last couple of years, why don't you pick up this and get to know this Jesus? He is so worth knowing. That'll do for me, and I'm going to hand back to Andy now. Thanks.